These gods of the Pokemon world hold power over the very fabric of its universe, and they're the strongest Pokemon there are. So today, we're going to be ranking every single legendary Pokemon from weakest to most powerful. First up, the rules. Rather than focusing on their strength in-game, we'll instead focus on how strong they are canonically in the lore of the Pokemon world. These are legendary Pokemon after all. It makes sense to use legends to rank them. We'll also be counting mythical Pokemon because they are technically a subset of legendaries, but we will not, however, be counting Ultra Beasts since it's debatable whether or not they are also a subset. So with that said, let's start off by looking at the so-called legendaries that are weaker than even regular Pokemon. This is the legendary D tier, and unfortunately our gold medal of weakness has to go to Cosmog and Cosmoem. To get the obvious out of the way, these two can eventually evolve into Solgaleo or Lunala. Two Pokemon who we won't see on this list for quite some time. Clearly, the power gap between these two sets is far too great to rationalize, let alone justify, ranking them together. So let's talk about these two first. While they can be used as a power source to open up an Ultra Wormhole, that's pretty much all they can do. And they don't even have this power on their own anyway. The only notable thing to mention is that Cosmog and Cosmoem are both tied for the lightest and heaviest Pokemon in existence, respectively. Add on the fact that Cosmoem is also tied for the smallest, and they serve as clear and irrefutable proof that physics does not exist in the Pokemon world, through the principle of mass conservation alone. In a similar vein, we're giving the silver medal of weakness to Kubfu. While not nearly on the same scale as our previous entrants, the power gap between Kubfu and Urshifu is still significant enough for us to count them as separate entities. Besides, with how few legendary Pokemon evolve anyway, we can afford to split a few entries here and there. Regardless, the whole point of Kubfu is that it's weak and inexperienced. It's still in basic training to the point where it has yet to decide which style to practice or which of the towers of two fists to train in. And while it can get stronger through training, the amount of effort it needs to put in and the fact that it needs a strong trainer to work with holds it back significantly. Third from the bottom of weakness, we have the Sea Drifter Pokemon, Phione. Despite its reputation amongst the community, Phione isn't quite useless on its own, unlike the previous three. That being said, its powers are still a far cry from being considered legendary, so to speak. It spends its days floating lazily in the ocean using its natural camouflage to avoid the detection of predators. The only thing that spares it from dropping any lower is its connection to Manaphy, which gives it access to mind manipulation and other psychic powers. It isn't quite on the same level as its cousin's Heart Swap, but it still has access to their new move, Take Heart. Next up, we have our first mythical with the Melody Pokemon, Meloetta. But first, coding is a great skill in today's job market, but learning to code can be notoriously boring. And for many of us, instead of learning these skills, we'd rather do something fun like catching and battling Pokemon. But what if I told you there was actually a way to learn these coding skills that felt like you were playing a fun RPG game? That's where our sponsor, Boot.dev, comes in. With Boot.dev, you'll be taught back-end web development from start to finish in the Python and Go programming languages. And the brilliant thing about Boot.dev is that the system was built to make sure that you're never bored, because it turns learning to code into a captivating, self-paced, online role-playing game. The platform is designed to get you writing tons of code because getting your hands on the keyboard and shipping projects is really the only way to learn. Now, according to Stack Overflow, the median salary for a back-end developer is over $100,000 per year in the US, and a lot of programmers nowadays get to work from home. And if the idea of learning these skills while earning XP and achievements and completing quests lights up the dopamine receptors in your brain, Boot.dev is perfect for you. They even do bi-monthly boss fights where the community rallies together and gains bonus XP for each lesson completed during the event. On top of this, the Boot.dev team doesn't want any student to feel like they spent money on something that's not helping them. So they offer a free demo of every course and its interactive features, and a 30-day no questions asked refund policy. So click the link in the description box and use code POKEBINGE to get 25% off your first month or even your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Thanks so much Boot.dev for sponsoring us today and making coding so much fun. Now, let's get back to the video. Next up, we have our first mythical with the Melody Pokemon, Meloetta. It's somewhat impressive that a Pokemon who can freely change its form ends up so low on our list, but here it is. As the name implies, Meloetta's power is focused primarily on music, whether that be singing beautiful songs in its aria form that can control the emotions of those who hear it, or performing graceful dances in its pirouette form that can inspire those around it. The main issue is that the source of its power, its signature move Relic Song, is actually a lost art to the point that up until recently, even Meloetta itself could not remember it, and had to be taught the move via a special move tutor. We have to give our next spot to the artificial Pokemon Magearna. While it may be a nightmare in competitive, in universe, Magearna isn't really all that powerful. Its most notable attribute is its soul heart, the artificial soul that makes up the actual Pokemon, while its metal body is more of a mechanical fursuit than anything else. Though it may be artificial, the soul heart gives Magearna a strong sense of empathy, giving it the ability to feel the emotions of every living thing around it, which makes it a great caretaker, but aside from that, it doesn't have much going for it in the power department. Keeping the theme going, next we have the Gratitude Pokemon, Shaman. Like the previous few entrants, Shaman does have some level of power, but not that much more than other regular Pokemon. It has the power to purify toxins, fertilize soil, and germinate flowers and other plants in an instant, which is impressive for the scale, but isn't exactly unique to Shaman. Most other grass types have similar abilities, so enough of them would be able to do the same thing on their own. Aside from that, the only notable thing about Shaman is its sky form, which grants it the ability to fly, which, gee, what an upgrade. It's not like 90% of this list can do that already without a special form change. And our final spot in this tier will have to go to the seafaring Pokemon Manaphy. For the purpose of this list, Manaphy is basically just Fione, but more so. It wanders the seas, traveling great distances to return to the cold seafloor it was born in, and is overall very susceptible to changes in its environment. The difference here is that Manaphy's powers are more developed than Fione's, to the point where it can link the minds of two individuals and change their perspectives in the form of its former signature move, Heart Swap. It accomplishes this in a way not unlike Magearna, coincidentally the only other Pokemon capable of using the move, through its hypersensitive empathic link to those around it, giving Manaphy a clear idea of what those individuals are thinking. And that's really what it has going for it, and it's still a bit too floaty for its own good in general. With the D tier wrapped up, let's move into our next section. These legendaries fit into the C tier. Starting off, we have a double entry with Blastrier and Spectrier. While they too are both nightmares in competitive battling, these My Little Pony rejects aren't all that special in the actual canon. Sure, they're fairly powerful in general and are on the upper end of strength as far as ice and ghost types are, respectively. But as far as legendary Pokemon are concerned, these two aren't that special. They're basically just mean, tough horses, and all the legends surrounding them are solely in relation to their connection to Calyrex being able to tame them. But at least the narrative takes some time to establish them as powerful Pokemon in general, which is what earns them a spot in the bottom of our C tier. In a similar vein, we're giving our next spot to both Heatran and Volcanion. We're gonna rank these two together because they're basically the same Pokemon, aside from the whole secondary typing thing, of course. They're both powerful fire-type Pokemon, harnessing the power of the Earth's core and underwater volcanoes, respectively. That said, like the previous entry, both seem to be lacking in the Legends department, as there's almost nothing that distinguishes them from other equally powerful fire types. The only thing that gives us anything to work with is the fact that the Magma Stone exists, which has the power to calm and control Heatran, and which is said Heatran will fiercely protect. However, since it's considered canon that multiple Heatran exist and that not all of them are connected to a Magma Stone, this sort of brings us back to square one. But let's talk about the Wushu Pokemon, Urshifu. Having completed its training at one of the Towers of Two Fists, both forms of Urshifu have become masters in their chosen style. They've honed their powers and martial prowess to perfection and use their skills to protect those they hold dear. This puts them, well, to put it bluntly, on the same level as just about any other fully evolved fighting type Pokemon. They don't have any special powers or legendary feats that would put them above other generally strong Pokemon, aside from training in a secret art that few others have access to. Similarly, we'll be giving our next spot to both Type Null and Silvally. Like the other man-made Pokemon on this list, Silvally and its de-evolution Type Null were created to be a weapon, specifically one to be used against the Ultra Beasts using its signature Arceus system to exploit their weaknesses. However, the scientists were unable to control it, and they were forced to place a limiter helmet on it, shutting off its Arceus system until the Type Null can control its powers properly. That said, that's about all that its helmet does to limit Type Null's power, so we can place it alongside its evolution Silvally in terms of ranking. That said, out of the 3 man-made Pokemon on this list, Silvally is easily the weakest, not only in physical strength, but also in its Arceus system being dependent on having access to a full set of memories to access its full potential. Next, we have the rogue monkey Pokemon Zarude. In keeping with the theme of this section, Zarude is fairly strong in general, though not quite up to what should be considered legendary standards. For that matter, the fact that they live in packs of multiple Zarude is shaky enough grounds for being a legendary, but that's neither here nor there. Their most notable feature is their ability to heal others, something which is rare for grass types and almost unheard of in dark types. Moving on to the Thunderclap Pokemon Zorora. Unlike other electric type Pokemon, Zorora doesn't have an internal organ to produce its own electricity. Whether this makes Zorora stronger or weaker is up for debate, as while this makes it inherently weaker than other electric Pokemon, the fact that it can still generate enough electricity is an impressive feat on its own. What isn't up for debate is just how blindingly fast Zorora is, being able to move at the speed of a lightning bolt and tear into its prey with its electrified claws. Our next spot will be going to another group entry with the Legendary Titans, the first of our legendary trios, or rather a quintet in this case. The Titans are mostly special for what they are as opposed to how strong they are. As beings made of pure stone, ice, metal, electricity, and draconic energy, they have a level of mastery over their respective element. Of course, that's not even remotely special, as pretty much every Pokemon has that ability to at least some extent. However, the Titans do take this to a level that few other Pokemon of their respective types can match. For instance, Regice can survive being submerged in lava without melting. Registeel's body is so hard that it cannot be scratched by anything, and Regidrago is rumored to have the powers of every Dragon-type Pokemon in existence. That last one has some implications regarding several dragons we've yet to cover on this list, but we're gonna say that the lack of special abilities across the board for the Titans means there's some limitations as to what that statement entails. Now, from one sort of, but not really trio to another, next we have the Swords of Justice. While we're still a few entries away from the truly special powers, these 4 managed to land a spot this high mainly for having actual legends about their strength. Countless tales tell of their heroic deeds, from rescuing Pokemon from natural disasters to waging war against the humans who would do them harm. They accomplish this mainly through the power of teamwork, utilizing their respective strengths to their advantage while covering for each other's weaknesses. However, individually, they are not that much stronger than other fully evolved Pokemon, and even as a group, they're nothing particularly special, at least when it comes to legendaries. But to cover a proper trio, let's look at the Loyal 3 next. Like our previous entry, these 3 rely on the power of teamwork to get what they want, having some of the most impressive strength, brains, and beauty of all Pokemon. They'll often gang up on Pokemon weaker than them, all while mooching off the goodwill of others to get even stronger. However, there are 3 major flaws that keep them from ranking any higher. The first is that they rely heavily on the legends surrounding them to maintain their image. Legends which are, to put it mildly, a load of Gramble Shinotic. Second, while they are threatening as a group, individually they're nothing special and can be taken care of very easily, even after powering up with the special Moochie. Finally, and most importantly, their powers are not actually their own. They were given their abilities by another Pokemon, which we won't see on this list for quite some time. For that reason, the lousy 3 have to do some serious heavy lifting just to make it up this high. Next, we have the Gloom Dweller Pokemon, Marshadow. Being an extremely shy Pokemon, Marshadow spends most of its time hiding in the shadows of others. You'd think that would be grounds for a lower ranking than this, but Marshadow really puts in the work to turn this negative into a plus. It studies the movements of those around it while it hides, and through mimicry, it copies and advances their skills to enhance its martial prowess. It can't copy any special powers, obviously, but through this method, it is capable of mastering any martial art faster and more effectively easily than the most skilled masters of said art. But now we finally get to the OG legendary trio, the legendary birds. And for the record, this will include both the Kanto and Galar variants of the trio. Aside from the whole harmony of fire, ice, and lightning thing, or perhaps maybe the harmony of fighting psychic and dark, depending on your preferred flavor. We hate to say it, but there really isn't that much special about them. Their abilities are fairly standard for Pokemon of their respective types, though the Galarian birds have some features that reference their Cantonian counterparts. The main difference is that their abilities are actually stronger on average than others of their particular type. For example, Kanto Zapdos can cause thunderstorms just by flapping its wings, and Galarian Articuno can use its psychic powers to freeze living and non-living things on a molecular level. Then there's Cantonian Moltres, which is basically immortal so long as it can find an active volcano to dive into and burn its body to restore and revive itself, much like a phoenix. But we're finally getting to the more substantial part of our list. These are the somewhat extraordinary legendary Pokemon, and we're placing them in the B tier. Let's kick this section off with the Lunar Duo. From this point onwards, most Pokemon will have some sort of special power that sets them apart from regular Pokemon. In the case of Darkrai and Cresselia, their powers are tied to the realm of nightmares and pleasant dreams, and the ability to manifest them in harmful and helpful ways, respectively. Darkrai is the stronger of the two, both in its combat prowess and its ability to spread unending nightmares to those around it simply by existing. However, while Darkrai is better offensively, Cresselia is more defensive, being able to dispel the nightmares created by the former and healing others to boot. Ultimately, these two are a dynamic duo, and you can't take one without the other, so the specific nature of Cresselia's warding power drags them down a bit. But let's move on to the legendary beasts. Their most notable feature as a group is the fact that they died in the burned tower before being revived by Ho-Oh. However, that's more of a feat for the latter than anything, so we can't count that for these three. What we can count for them is that each of them individually has powers that far exceed those of ordinary Pokemon. Raikou and Entei are the most destructive of the three, being able to freely control storm clouds and volcanic eruptions at will. Meanwhile, Suicune is more protective, being able to walk on water and instantly purify any body of water that it touches. It's also described as being the closest to Ho-Oh among its trio, and even has some sort of connection to the unknown. Next, we have the Paleozoic Pokemon Genesect. The second of our man-made Pokemon on this list, Genesect manages to succeed, where Silvally had failed mainly due to motivating factors. Whereas Silvally was created to be a specialized tool for an ostensibly altruistic organization, Genesect was made as a weapon of mass destruction for an evil team bent on world domination. Additionally, when the project was cancelled by N, the scientist who eventually completed it poured all his frustration into making Genesect as strong as possible, even before being revived and modified. It was already an apex predator and a powerful hunter. However, with the added cannon and high-speed flight configuration, it has become a much more potent threat to people and Pokemon alike. So let that be a lesson. If you want to make something more dangerous, give it a gun and see what happens. In a similar vein, we're giving our next spot to the DNA Pokemon, Deoxys. While not a man-made Pokemon, it is an extraterrestrial one, so it's not going to have any special powers over our world. Still, that doesn't stop Deoxys from being a potent threat in its own right. As a mutated virus, its body is incredibly malleable, being able to transform itself into various forms to adapt to its environment and survive in this foreign world. It's also virtually indestructible, as it can instantly regenerate its body as long as the crystallized core remains intact. This, along with its ability to change its forms at will, makes Deoxys a dangerous Pokemon even without any godlike powers. Next, let's take a look at the Paradox Duo. You know Paradox Pokemon are pretty tough, aren't they? Not only are they stronger than average than modern Pokemon, but they get even tougher when under the sun or in electric terrain, respectively. And nowhere is this more clear than with the strongest of the bunch, Koraidon and Miraidon, who are able to automatically set up the field conditions which make them stronger. Oh, and if you're wondering why we're talking exclusively about game mechanics instead of lore here, well, that's because there's really nothing here to speak of. Aside aside from the ones we meet in the story, any information we have about these two is mostly hearsay from unreliable sources. Still, for how powerful Paradox Pokemon are in general, we feel confident placing the Winged King and Iron Serpent this high up. On to another group entry with the Forces of Nature. These four seem to represent opposing forces, with Tornadus and Thundurus being more destructive and Landorus and Enamorus being more constructive. And to be perfectly frank, it's the latter two that really carries this group this far. While the former two are certainly in the upper echelon of flying and electric Pokemon, their abilities are still firmly rooted in the basic rules of their respective types. On the other hand, not only was Landorus able to subdue and punish them for their misdeeds, but it and Enamorus were able to heal the land and fertilize the fields that were destroyed in the wake of their feuding, bringing spring and good harvest to the people. Ultimately, these two are doing some serious heavy lifting to bring this group into the legendary side of this list, but at least they have some actual legends to help them out. From one quartet to another, we have the Treasures of Ruin. Born from artifacts imbued with negative emotions, these four are almost single-handedly responsible for destroying the ancient kingdom of Paldea in the past. Their very existence evokes destruction, leaving trails of ruin everywhere they go. This can either be indirectly, such as Wuqian and Chiyu, destroying the immediate area just by existing, or directly, like Qianpo and Tinglu, triggering devastating natural disasters on a regular basis. In either case, the destructive potential of these fearsome four was so great that they needed to be sealed away for the safety of everyone until the end of time, until a child with a bicycle lizard comes along, whichever happens first. Moving on to the Eon duo. When you think about it, it's kind of inspiring that the first Pokemon capable of Mega Evolving barely made it into the top half of the list. However, even taking their Mega forms out of the equation, Latios and Latios are still more than capable on their own. This is primarily due to the existence of the Soul Dew, a protective item containing the spirit of a deceased Eon, granting its power to its next of kin. This, alongside with their sight-sharing ability, gives them the ability to look after one another and share their powers, in order to protect those they care about. And when you combine this with the aforementioned Mega Evolution, this duo easily earns a spot this high up. Next, we have the subjugation Pokemon, Pecharunt. Despite not being a true Psychic-type Pokemon, Pecharunt has a level of mind-controlling powers that put most actual Psychics to shame. As the true mastermind behind the Loyal Three, it was the one to give them their respective powers. It accomplishes this through the use of its Toxic Chain, which draws out the latent powers and desires of the wearer in exchange for placing them fully under Pecharunt's control. It then uses its Toxic Muchi to turn anyone who eats it into mindless puppets for it to use as it sees fit. These puppets then help spread the Muchi out to more and more people and Pokemon to help amass an army to serve Pecharunt's will, and if left unchecked, could potentially conquer entire nations through this method. Rounding out this Momotaro story, we have the mask Pokemon, Ogerpon. While it has the ability to draw out the power of various masks, particularly those laced with terrestrialization energy, Ogerpon's true strength lies in its accomplishments in battle. After losing its companion and most of its masks to the Loyal Three, it dons its last mask and proceeds to battle them on its own, defeating all three and subsequently halting Pecharunt's ambitions. And really, Ogerpon's placement on this list is really that simple. Pecharunt is one of the stronger entries on this list, and Ogerpon is able to one-up it in terms of strength, at least indirectly. And rounding out the B tier, we have the jewel Pokemon Diancie. As a mutation of Carbink, Diancie has the power to create diamonds from nothing by compressing carbon found in the air between its hands. Pokemon have been shown to do some crazy things in general, but this is on a whole nother level. For further context, diamonds are generally created at a temperature of around 2500 degrees Fahrenheit and at a pressure of over 825,000 pounds per square inch, in a process that usually takes several months minimum to produce a single tiny diamond. As if that wasn't enough, which it comfortably is. Diancie also has the ability to Mega Evolve, which amplifies this ability to insane proportions. The only reason why it falls short of our A tier is because we've reserved it for the more godlike Pokemon, which Diancie sadly just falls slightly short of. And with that said, we now move into the actually legendary section, where the true gods of the Pokemon world reside. This is the A tier. Starting out this section, we have the Tower Duo. We've touched on this this earlier, but it bears repeating how Ho-Oh has the power to bring other creatures back from the dead. Having rescued and revived the legendary beasts from the burned tower, this one feat gives Ho-Oh some of the most potent healing powers of all Pokemon. However, aside from this one moment, that's about all it gets as far as special powers. It does have the ability to give eternal happiness to those who see it, but that's mostly hearsay up to interpretation, and wildly inferior to its ability to resurrect the dead. By comparison, Lugia has no known special powers to speak of that match Ho-Oh's true resurrection, but it is canonically said to be as powerful as the latter, so we can assume it must have something. Next, we have to talk about the guardian deities. These four collectively make up the protectors of Alola, each being the guardian of their respective islands. While they've fought each other occasionally in the past, their primary focus is defending their islands from outside threats, including Ultra Beasts, villainous teams, and most importantly for this list, the Light Trio. When Solgaleo and Lunala arrived in Alola, the guardian deities fought against them to protect their homes. While the latter did lose, the former were impressed enough to bestow the Tapunium Z on the guardians and entrust them with protecting the Cosmog while they grew up. Then, when Necrozma appeared and stole the light of the world, the guardians teamed up using the power of the Z crystals, reclaimed the stolen light, and banished Necrozma back from whence it came. In a similar vein, we're giving our next spot to the hero duo. Like our previous entrant, Zacian and Zamazenta make it this high up almost exclusively due to their accomplishments in battle. In this case, they're almost single-handedly responsible for defeating Eternatus and bringing the Darkest Day to an end. Keep in mind that this also comes at a time when Dynamax Pokemon were still a foreign concept and were a lot harder to deal with. And with all that in mind, the fact that they were able to defeat all the out-of-control Dynamax Pokemon on top of Eternatus definitely earns them a much higher spot. Now we have the duo of Reshiram and Zekrom. We won't be counting Kyurem in this entry for reasons we'll explain in a bit. Having some of the strongest fire and electric powers of all, these two are capable of scorching the earth and are thought to represent the power of fusion. And no, we're not talking about the polymerization style fusion with Kyurem to merge into a new form. We'll get to that later. No, we're talking about nuclear fusion on an atomic level and the release of energy that such a process creates. This means that these two are literally the Pokemon equivalent of an atomic bomb, or more accurately, a nuclear reactor, and the implications of such power simply cannot be ignored. For our fifth group entry in a row, we have both Jirachi and Hoopa sharing a spot. Now, to explain our reasoning for lumping these two together, let's take a look at Jirachi first. While it's said to have the ability to grant wishes, in reality it has a handy little trick to get around having true wish fulfillment abilities: teleportation. Rather than creating objects or bending the universe to its will, Jirachi will simply teleport things in from elsewhere when someone makes a wish. That said, there doesn't seem to be any limitation to this power, so it could theoretically take anything it wants from anywhere in the world. This is basically identical to Hoopa's power of opening portals across dimensions, and taking anything or anyone it wants from any corner of the multiverse. This even extends to other legendary Pokemon, meaning that a lot of the strengths of the rest of this list extend to these two as well. Still, this is an extension of the power of those Pokemon, not Jirachi or Hoopa specifically, so there's only so much this can do to bump these two up our ranking. Next, let's take a look at the High King Pokemon, Calyrex. It's really impressive how the mechanic that makes Calyrex strong in-game, that being fusing with Glastrier and Spectrier, ends up being the least impressive of its feats. Its powers are strong enough to put almost any other psychic Pokemon to shame. It can dominate the mind of any individual in its range, relocate an entire forest with its ecosystem intact, and see all the possible pasts, presents, and futures simultaneously. It can instantly fertilize barren fields and have them grow crops instantly. It can stop a meteor from destroying the planet. It can even take the powers of its chosen mounts, amplify them, and make them its own. That said, all of this comes with the caveat that Calyrex must receive its powers through the prayers of its followers. When the people stop believing in it, Calyrex's powers slowly disappear. And since this all takes place after Calyrex is all but a forgotten memory by the people of the Crown Tundra, we unfortunately can't rank it any higher. From one fusing Pokemon to another, next is the boundary Pokemon Kyurem. Going back to the fusion theme of the Tau Trio, Kyurem is the culmination of that theme, being able to literally fuse with the other two. It's theorized that this is due to Kyurem being the original dragon of the Unova region. When Reshiram and Zekrom split from it, Kyurem was left with some residual DNA from the former two, allowing it to use Absifusion to absorb them back and fill the void. Interestingly, while Kyurem is neither a fire nor electric Pokemon, when fused with Reshiram or Zekrom respectively, its powers over those elements far exceed those of its base forms, kept in check only by clashing with its existing ice powers. That said, it also has full control over said ice powers, so it can easily use this to its advantage and unleash the full potential of its immense power. That said, without Reshiram or Zekrom to fuse with, Kyurem is slightly weaker than the other two. Its frozen body is hard to control, and its ice powers don't have the same level of mastery as the fire and electric powers of the other two. Still, its aggressive disposition makes it plenty dangerous on its own, and it can outperform its counterparts at their own game. So Kyurem still easily ranks higher than them on principle. Similar to the above, we're giving our next spot to Solgaleo and Lunala. Again, we're not counting Necrozma here for what should be obvious reasons at this point. Nonetheless, as beings of light, Solgaleo and Lunala were the ones who brought light to Alola, resulting in the ancient kings worshipping them as gods. They also have the power to open ultra wormholes and traverse through ultra space, and unlike their pre-evolutions, this ability is innate and able to be used at will. The only real downside here is that Necrozma sort of hard counters these two, as they're both ineffective against and often targeted by it. That said, one Pokemon with an advantage against what are otherwise basically gods doesn't quite detract enough from these two for us to rank it any lower. Moving on to the time travel Pokemon Celebi. This one is going to be simple because the Pokédex category basically says it all. As the tin says, Celebi has the power to travel through time, and with that comes all the paradox-inducing abilities that come with the territory. It functions as a guardian of the forest and does what it can to protect both its home and the timeline. Whenever it senses an anomaly in the timeline, it travels to that time to fix the problem before the timeline falls apart. It can even coexist with its past and future selves and join forces with them to deal with a greater threat or revive a fallen incarnation of itself. Additionally, it has the power to purify its surroundings, causing plants to flourish in its presence and being able to dispel the darkness in the hearts of shadow Pokemon. That being said, Celebi is a bit more passive than its position would suggest, as it's established that it generally avoids time periods of strife, which is exactly what a guardian of the forest should be going after. Still, wasted potential aside, the ability to travel through time is just too reality warping to ignore. Next we have the Terra Pokemon Terapagos. While its normal form is small and weak, Terapagos is never in its normal form when it counts. It's the progenitor of both the stellar Terra type as well as the terrestrial phenomenon as a whole, being able to absorb terrestrial energy to form a crystalline shell to protect itself. It uses this power to survive deep underground and avoid certain extinction by going into a million-year state of hibernation, hidden inside of a crystal. Additionally, it appears to have some control over time, being able to bring people in from the past as well as power time machines used to bring Paradox Pokemon to the modern era. To add to this, when it's exposed to terrestrial energy itself, it transforms into its stellar form, a form so full of energy that it can resist even the Master Ball and threaten to collapse Paldea's ecosystem with its very existence. With that amount of power in such a small Pokemon, we'd be crazy to rank it any lower. But now we move on to the Aura Trio. From here on out, the power levels have gone so far beyond rational thought that the competition becomes extremely tight. Nowhere does that become more apparent than the Aura Trio, where the power to give and take life indiscriminately doesn't even crack the top 10. This is primarily due to two reasons. One is the fact that Xerneas and Yveltal are in direct opposition to one another in both concept and motive, so they tend to cancel one another out. In fact, Xerneas will specifically follow Yveltal solely to undo the loss of life that the latter spreads with its very presence. And the other is that Zygarde exists, and as an emissary of order, it serves to keep the two in check. Not only is it specifically tailored to cancel out the powers of the rest of its trio, but when it's in complete form, with all its cells, it easily overpowers them and most of the Pokemon on this list. This would normally be grounds for ranking Zygarde above the other two, but not only is it generally more passive than other legendary Pokemon, but even even its complete form can't compete with the rest of this list. So let that sink in. Entering our top 10, we have the colossal Pokemon Regigigas. You know we're taking the lore seriously when Regigigas lands in the top 10 instead of dead freaking last. It has incredible endurance, being able to survive both boiling lava and freezing temperatures easily. It also has immense strength, which is used to tow the continents to where they are today. However, all that pales in comparison to its greatest power of all, the ability to create life. Regigigas was the one to create the 5 legendary titans from inanimate materials and imbued them with life and sentience of their own. Keep in mind, this isn't bringing someone back to life like Ho-Oh or Xerneas. This is bestowing life on an inanimate object where no life existed before. The implications of this are absolutely staggering. So we're gonna go ahead and ignore slow start here and give Regigigas a spot this high up. Now we have to take a look at the Weather Trio. And you know what's more impressive than towing continents? How about creating them? That's the main claim to fame for the Weather Trio, being the ones to shape the world as we know it. Groudon shaped the land, Kyogre shaped the seas, and Rayquaza created the atmosphere while keeping the previous 2 in check. What's more, while their powers have waned over the years, when exposed to a source of primal energy, such as the orbs or a keystone, they can unlock their primal forms, or mega evolution in Rayquaza's case, and have the power to expand their domains once again. The only reason why these 3 aren't ranked any higher is that their powers are limited exclusively to the material world, which just doesn't compare to the metaphysical powers that these next few entries have. Speaking of which, our next spot will be going to the victory Pokemon, Victini. It may seem anticlimactic going from 3 super ancient titans to a small rabbit, but hear us out. Victini has the power to bring victory to those it deems worthy. How or what that entails is never really made clear, but it seems to be as infallible as it is potent. More impressive, however, is the fact that Victini is also a source of infinite energy, which it's able to share with its friends and allies. While we tend to conflate the concept of infinity with just a large number, it's worth remembering just how incomprehensible the idea of truly infinite energy really is. The applications of this are equally vast, so for this power alone, we're gonna give Victini this high of a spot. Similar to the above, we have the gigantic Pokemon Eternatus. Like Victini, Eternatus is a source of effectively infinite energy, being the source of the wishing stones and Galar particles that allow Pokemon to Dynamax. The main difference between the two, however, is in their application. Not only does Eternatus have the power to control the Dynamax phenomenon on its own, but it also has the power to absorb the energy it releases, allowing it to revert to its true Eternamax form. In this form, Eternatus has a power level that far exceeds that of any Pokemon in existence, at least in-game. It has the highest base stat total in the game, beating out the second place finishers of Mega Rayquaza and Mega Mewtwo by almost 50%. And yeah, I know we aren't looking at game statistics for this list, but with a gap that large, we have to at least acknowledge it. That said, its current form is more reasonable in the power department, at least as far as this list is concerned. And just missing out on the top 5, or our S tier, we have the Lake Trio. These 3 were created by Arceus, and each make up the forces that govern the mind: knowledge, emotion, and willpower. They collectively use their powers to create the human spirit, giving birth to intelligent life in the Pokemon world. Additionally, they have the power to control their respective aspects of the mind, being able to revoke them from whomever they want at will. Anyone that looks into Uxie's eyes is rendered brain dead. Those who touch Mesprit become completely emotionless, and those who hurt Azelf literally lose the will to live. Additionally, they have the power to create the Red Chain, an item that gives the wielder the power to keep Dialga or Palkia in check, which in and of itself is an incredible feat. That said, they themselves are a bit too squishy for their own good. Aside from their mind-altering powers, they are fairly weak on their own, as shown when Team Galactic was able to capture them with little effort. Still, for being the creators of Spirit, we can give them a spot just outside of our top 5. And with that said, we get to the very top of our legendary list, the top 5 most powerful legendaries, the S tier. And our 5th place spot goes to the genetic Pokemon Mewtwo. The 3rd and strongest of the man-made Pokemon, Mewtwo is a genetically enhanced clone of Mew. It was made to be a weapon for Team Rocket, who wanted to create the world's strongest Pokemon, and they succeeded. Well, okay, not quite, since there's 4 more entries left, but it's still a cool line regardless. Still, they were able to get pretty close, as a creature made solely for battle. Mewtwo's offensive capabilities have been enhanced to the max. It's one of the most savage Pokemon in existence, capable of thinking only of destruction of its foes. It has some of the strongest psychic powers in existence, being able to completely crush a skyscraper with just a thought. On top of that, Mewtwo also has not 1, but 2 Mega Evolutions, each of which amplify its battle prowess even further. It may not have any special abilities in comparison with the rest of this section, but the sheer raw power and battle prowess it does have more than makes Mewtwo a god among Pokemon in its own right. Just barely missing out on the podium, our next spot goes to the Creation Trio. When a group known as the Creation Trio doesn't even make the top 3 in terms of power, you know things have gotten too far out of hand. Like the Lake Trio, these 3 were created by Arceus to keep the universe in balance, each governing a specific aspect of the very fabric of reality. And yes, that includes Giratina, who may have been banished to the Distortion world for its violence, but still utilizes its dominion over antimatter to maintain balance in the real world. Meanwhile, Dialga and Palkia maintain order by ensuring that time moves normally, and space remains stable. If you think these would be insane powers to have that would normally be a guarantee for a top spot, then you'd be right. However, the top 3 are somehow even more ridiculous. The bronze medal of power has to go to the Prism Pokemon Necrozma. Like the rest of its trio, Necrozma is a being of light, providing a source of energy for its homeworld. Or at least it was until the ancient people of Ultra Megalopolis sought Necrozma's power for their own, stripping it of its light and leaving it in a state of constant pain. Since then, Necrozma constantly seeks more and more light to reclaim that which was lost, inevitably leaving despair and destruction in its wake. It absorbs all the light in its home dimension, the dimensions of the Ultra Beasts, and eventually tries to do the same to Alola. Where its real power comes from is in its ability to absorb other creatures of light, including Solgaleo and Lunala, giving it a source of infinite energy and power. What's more, even when in this state, it still hungers for more light, continuing to absorb more and more light until it ultimately consumes all the light that it can find. It may be one thing to create the world, but it's a whole other thing to destroy all the worlds. So we must give Necrozma a spot in our top 3, only beaten out of the top spots by a few technicalities. The silver medal of power goes to the new species Pokemon Mew. Going from the destroyer of worlds to a squishy pink embryo seems a bit jarring, but most of you should have seen this one coming. As the progenitor of all Pokemon, Mew has the DNA of every Pokemon in existence and can transform into any of them at will, including other legendary Pokemon. This means that Mew can have all the powers of every single Pokemon on this list, and potentially break the entire multiverse if it so chooses. Need to revive a fallen friend? Both Ho-Oh and Xerneas are right there. Want to go back in time to undo a certain mistake? Either Celebi or Dialga should do just fine. Even Necrozma, with all its universe-ending powers, is merely a simple transformation away, easily making Mew the strongest Pokemon we've covered thus far. And the only reason why it isn't number 1 is because there's still one more that even Mew can't copy. That's right, we're giving the gold medal of power to the alpha Pokemon, Arceus. Yeah, we know, not the most creative pick for our top spot, to give the literal creator deity the gold medal. But I mean, come on, surely it can't be that simple, right? In-game, it's only the 8th strongest Pokemon, and even in the lore, there are several Pokemon who should theoretically be able to take Arceus down. Heck, Arceus is a god of light, so something like Necrozma should be able to absorb and assimilate it. And even if that wasn't the case, Mew can still transform into Arceus anyway, so what gives? Well, at the end of the day, we don't know the full scope of Arceus' true power. As revealed in Legends Arceus, the Arceus we know today is merely a fraction of its true power, an avatar with which it can interact with the material world from whatever higher plane it exists on. And this avatar alone is strong enough to earn a spot in our top 3 on its own power. The fact that the real Arceus is exponentially stronger than this avatar is more than enough to give it the gold medal of strength, even ignoring its universe-creating powers.